Good evening, everybody. We'd like to start our presentation. People can come in and get seats. Okay, good evening. My name is Mike Burns. I'm athletic coordinator for the school district. And I just want to say thank you to parents, student athletes, and coaches for taking some time out of your busy schedule. We're in between sports seasons, most of us, so this should be some time off, and I'm really just impressed with everyone for coming tonight and trying to learn a little bit more. I'd like to say a few words about our guest speaker. Well, let me get my email back on. Jessica Garay is an assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at Syracuse University. She is also the consulting sports dietitian for Lemoyne College Athletics. Jessica earned a Ph.D. in science education from Syracuse University, a master's degree in exercise science from George Washington University, and Bachelor of Science degrees in nutritional sciences and human development from Cornell University. She has a great presentation here for us tonight. I'm really excited she reached out on behalf of her Beef Council, and was excited to try to do something like this. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jessica Garay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. It's really nice to be here, especially because I know so many of you. So I appreciate the support and having you come out. You might have seen on the way in, there are some samples. I'm going to put some more out at the end because we're going to talk about some of the things that I have samples of. So please don't be shy. Grab those. If you're listening on the live stream, welcome. And I apologize that you won't get the free samples. But a lot of the things we're going to talk about today are real food and real things that you can find, not necessarily specialty things. So my goal for tonight is just to really start with some basics, and then I have 5, what I call my Garay guidelines about sports nutrition. And then I'm going to end with a little bit of a challenge for you to think about over the next couple of weeks, maybe between now and Thanksgiving. And just to give you the highlights, right? Like, I am not the food police. I am actually a fan of eating, love food, so some very mediocre food photography that I've taken of things that I will be recommending. All right, so I think a lot of us, the parents in the room, probably remember learning about nutrition in health class, and depending on when we learned about it, we might have learned about the food guide pyramid, maybe before that, the basic 4 food groups, or my pyramid. Happy to tell you that things have evolved. So those of you that are in school now maybe have learned about my plate. And this is a really nice general overview of how to structure your plate at meal times, right? Focusing on the food groups. But this doesn't really give us food, right? It tells us the food groups and the structure. Half our plate should be fruits and veggies. The other half should be kind of a split between carbs and protein, and then something from the dairy group on the side. Well, what does that look like with real food? Here are some examples just of how we can hit my plate, right, for lunch or dinner with real food. Again, very mediocre food photography. So why should we care about this from a sports nutrition standpoint? Well, it becomes, as you progress through your athletic career, it becomes one of those like X factors that can really set you apart from other competitors. And this is true across all sports and really at every level. And now we're seeing this investment, especially at the college level, where lots and lots of colleges have sports dietitians on staff to help with this. Even Lemoyne, which is now like newly minted at Division I, has me there, not on a full-time basis, but to help give guidance around nutrition. And I think this, along with sleep and managing stress, are really some of those key things to kind of dial in as best you can to help give you an edge in addition to the work you're doing on the field, on the court, and wherever you're training. So that's one of the things that I think is really important. And like I said, I'm not the food police. My goal is to really help people fuel and perform at their best. And most of the time, my recommendation is to eat more. Like, that's what I say most of the time when I'm meeting with people is you gotta eat more. Okay, so my first rule here is that food I think of as fuel. And I know sometimes that relationship doesn't always have like a positive vibe to it, but it really does give us fuel all day long. It provides the support we need to not only just keep our bodies alive all day, but to perform when we are doing any sort of exercise or physical activity. So we really do need to give our body what it needs from the time we wake up until the time we go to bed. And I'll talk about some of those timing pieces and what that means for you guys as students or as parents going through your day. One of the struggles that I hear a lot is that, oh, I'm hungry, but I shouldn't eat because it's 9 o'clock at night. Really, if we're hungry, and this is true for kids, adults, anybody, if we're really truly hungry, that's our body's way of telling us that we have created an energy debt through the day that we haven't fully repaid yet, so we gotta eat to close that gap and make sure that our needs are being met. So if we're really feeling hungry, we gotta eat, even if it's 8, 9 o'clock at night. And so for those of you that are going all day long, and then you finally get home and now you have dinner, but then half an hour later you're hungry again. I know it might drive your parents crazy, but you might actually be hungry again, even if you just had dinner not that long ago. So having options for good hearty snacks at that point can be really helpful, and that's what we're gonna talk about, and I'll give you some examples for as well. But it's also learning to recognize when you might tend to get hungry. So some of us might have that that sensation like in the afternoon, right? Whether it's after school or when you get home from work and it's not quite dinner time yet, so you might be thinking like, oh, I need to hold myself off until dinner. Well, again, if you're feeling hungry, that's your body's way of telling you that you need to eat. So whether that means bump up dinner a little bit earlier or have something to hold you off until dinner, that's really important. And then lastly, I just want to emphasize what I call the 80-20 rule. So I know a lot of times as athletes, we have this, wanting to be the best, perfectionist mentality, and that's great. And that is often what drives us to be successful in our training. But when it comes to eating, it's really hard to be perfect all of the time, right? So my 80-20 rule, some people hear about this called the Pareto principle, is the idea that 80% of the time you should really try to make the best food choices that you can in that moment. And I would say that's especially true right before and right after you work out. But 20% of the time, it's okay to relax a little bit and not be so strict with your food choices. So yes, it's okay to have dessert, right? And it's okay to maybe not always pick the healthiest option if you're going to Dunkin' Donuts. But having that really be the 20% of the time and not the 80% of the time is important. And sometimes that's a slippery slope, especially now in the holiday season when there's so many good choices at Dunkin' Donuts. But that's, I think, helpful to have as just a positive eating mindset too, that food is meant to be enjoyed. And so there are absolutely times where it's okay to like take that pressure off and not always feel like you have to make the absolute healthiest choice. Okay, so I showed you my plate earlier, but what you learn in health class and what I showed you before is not specific to athletes in any way, right? And so the US Olympic Committee recognized that, and they thought, well, geez, if we're working with all these Olympic athletes, we need to have something that's way more customized for sports nutrition. And so these graphics that I'm going to show you are freely available on the US Olympic Committee website. I think it's a really nice way to kind of create a performance plate out of the My Plate messaging. So they have 3 plates that they've created for different types of training. And this is something else that's a little bit tricky to navigate, that each day when you're exercising is a little different, right? And so now, especially if you were in a fall sport, and now that's over, and you maybe are gonna be in a winter sport, but that hasn't started yet, you're kind of in this in-between time where maybe you're exercising, but it's just different than when you're in season. And so we need to adjust our kind of plan for the day based on what we're doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. But that's why the Olympic Committee made these 3 plates up. So what you see here first is just for sort of an easy training day, if it's a lighter day, even an off day. This picture is definitely fairly similar to just the regular My Plate, right? So half your plate, fruits and veggies, the other half kind of a mix between protein and carbs. And then you can see again, if you have goals around weight management, which is more for adults and Olympic athletes, then you can kind of modify how much is protein versus carb. But as we get into more heavy training, right, so if you're doing a like 2-hour practice or you have a longer workout, then you would start to shift your plate to have more carbs on there, still keeping protein the same, and then maybe instead of having half your plate fruits and vegetables, have most of that side vegetables, and then fruit can be on the side as maybe part of dessert or part of a snack, right? We're not saying no fruit, just fitting that into different places. And then on those real hard days, especially, going back to maybe like a preseason training where you have multiple workouts in a day, or you have, a big race day or a big game day coming up, then you really want to focus on carbs and have almost half the plate be carbs. And again, you're not like getting rid of fruit or vegetables. It's just to say in those moments, that's really going to be the focus to help give you that fuel. Because regardless of what exercise we're doing, the way that our muscles and our metabolism is set up, our body prefers to make energy from carbohydrates to fuel muscle contraction. So carb is really what we prefer to run on most of the time. When we're getting into like real endurance things, like those Ironman triathletes, then we might, shift from using carbs to using fat. But for most of our like sprint sports or short sports where we're doing something all out for a short time, volleyball, team like lacrosse, soccer, they're all really going to be based around carb as your main fuel source. Protein is important too, but for a different reason, right? Because we need to use the protein that we're eating to help repair and build our muscles to be stronger, but it's not necessarily what fuels us as an energy source when we're exercising. So they all have different roles. But these are just nice reminders that depending on your day, depending on where you are in your training, you kind of have to adjust how you structure your meals, especially for lunch and dinner, but also for breakfast, depending on what time it is that you're training. So that's the first message, right? That we really have to think of food as our fuel, and that we need to use that to provide our body with the energy we need all day long. Second rule is about something that's sort of fun to say, but sort of hard to say: nutrition periodization. Say that 3 times fast. This is the idea that as you go through not just your season, but like your entire year, things change, right? So you might have pre-season for your fall sport, and then you're in your fall sport, and then you have this transition time, and then you might go into a winter sport, or you might go into sort of just like an off time, and then you might go back into a different sport, right? So there's different seasons throughout the year, depending on what training you're doing, and you have to adjust, right? And that's not just what you're doing as far as training, it's what you're eating, it's your hydration, it's just your whole schedule, right? So every time you enter a new season, that might mean that your routine has to change a little bit, and what worked before might not work now, and so that's a place to just make sure that you figure out what a good routine is every time you make a shift. The other thing that I'll say is that if you have any goals around, improving, let's say, your body composition in some way, shape, or form, that's not something that's really best done when you're in season. Right? So especially at the college level, I have a lot of athletes who want to like gain muscle mass or gain weight, especially the guy athletes that I work with. And that's something that we can talk about when they're not in season, right? So like right now I'm talking to baseball and lacrosse about making some of those changes, but that's not something we're going to work on when it's the spring and they're in season. So any of those things, again, like there's a time to do that, and it's not in season. Because anytime you're trying to make changes to your weight, which I hope you're not doing as high school athletes too much, but just keep in mind, anytime we're losing weight as a human, for every pound we lose, we're still losing like 25% muscle mass, even if we're trying to lose fat. So it's not always great to lose weight, especially quickly, because you're not always going to lose it the way that you want it to be lost. And that's where working with a dietitian can definitely be helpful too. So that's one thing to keep in mind. All right, so the bulk of what I want to talk about tonight is timing, and timing around what to eat at different points throughout the day, but especially what to eat around when you're exercising. So my first message is that as you go through the week, especially when you're in school during the week itself, Monday through Friday, try as best you can to never skip breakfast. So let me see a show of hands, especially for the students in the room. How many of you ate breakfast this morning? Where are my hands at? Okay, so what did you eat for breakfast? Those of you that had your hands up, what did you eat? Who wants to be bold? What did you eat? A Pop-Tart. That was also my go-to when I was in high school. Okay. What else did we eat for breakfast? This is, again, like I said, no judgment, I'm not the food police. What else did we eat? I saw some other hands. Avocado toast. Awesome. You probably took a better picture of it than I would have. Good, so breakfast doesn't have to be elaborate, but eating breakfast is important. Have you guys ever heard this idea that breakfast is breaking the fast, right? So you go overnight, you're sleeping for however long, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. That's a long time for your body to go without any input of energy, right? So you wake up and now you're expected to just go perform at a high level in school and then in your sport. You have to start the day with something to eat. Now I know there's a lot of trends now around intermittent fasting, right, and about just fasting in general. I'll be very honest with you, that doesn't work for athletes. Like, it's rare, besides Derrick Henry, who's sort of an anomaly, it doesn't work for athletes. Like, I've talked to a lot of athletes who have tried that for various reasons, and they've all come to the conclusion, like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. So we need to be eating every couple of hours something, and that starts with breakfast. Now that can be really quick. It doesn't have to be an elaborate breakfast. It can be Pop-Tarts. It could be a bowl of cereal. It could be, you know, a bagel, something quick. I should have brought this. I'm a big fan of making a, you know, at-home breakfast sandwich. So I love those microwave egg poachers. Have you seen those in the grocery store? They kind of hang up by where they sell eggs. That's an easy, quick way to cook eggs in the morning, and then you toast your bagel while you microwave poach those eggs, and boom, you've got your own little breakfast sandwich that's quick, and you can take it right with you. So it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it should definitely be something that you work into your routine as best you can. Even if you only have a couple minutes, something's better than nothing. I know not everyone wakes up hungry and starving in the morning, but you gotta train yourself to eat, because that is the place where we start that energy debt, and again, it's hard to repay it if you're not eating consistently throughout the day. Okay, so then the other time that's important is after school, right? Right when you're about to maybe go into practice, or you get home and you're hungry and you know you have something later on. So this is a place where you really want to have a good snack, right? A hearty snack. And I've got a couple of suggestions here and a couple of other ideas. Most of the time when we gravitate towards a snack, especially when you look at the snack aisle in the grocery store, they're mostly carb-based snacks, right? Which isn't bad, but that's not what's gonna kind of satisfy you and hold you over. So trying to find a snack that has both carbs and protein, I think, is really key. So just a bunch of ideas here, right? Anything from like trail mix to cheese and crackers, you know, yogurt with some fruit or granola mixed in. I love those, like Sargento is one brand, Tops has their own version of this now, but those little prepackaged snacks where it's cheese and dried fruit, or cheese with crackers, or cheese with nuts, right? Like those are all really nice, easy snack options to have. I'm also a fan of having like a mini meal, so you could even do like a hard-boiled egg with crackers. And I always like to tell my athletes at Lemoyne, because they have these like various gadgets in their dorms, like you can actually hard-boil eggs in the air fryer. It's not terrible, it doesn't require a mess on the stove. So there's ways to do these things, even for those of you that don't cook a lot, right? The students in the room, you could still do this and have a good snack after school. I don't know if anyone's seen this, but it's been making the rounds now during football season. There's a statistic, a graphic of how many Uncrustables all the NFL teams go through. Has anyone seen that graphic? Yeah, I don't know. The Bills are kind of like middle of the road towards the bottom, I think. I forget who was first, maybe the Saints. But I'm telling you, every one of those teams has a sports dietitian, and they're going through Uncrustables for a reason, because it's an easy to digest, very widely appealing option for a quick source of carbs, a little bit of protein, right? And you can make your own Uncrustable. There's like nothing magical about the ones that they sell in the grocery store, but those are kind of a nice quick snack option. So yeah, follow what the NFL teams are doing. Maybe not to the same extent. That's a lot of Uncrustables, but that is a popular choice. A couple other snack ideas, and I like this visual because it just reinforces that you want to try to pick something with carbs and match it up with something that has protein too. So something from the left with something from the right can be a mix of whether it's something savory, something sweet, depending on what you prefer in that moment. And yes, my talk is being sponsored by the New York Beef Council, so I'll put my shout out right to my Jack Link's beef jerky up there. And there are some free samples of beef jerky out front too, so please grab those if you didn't already. And thank you to our beef farmers. I know we've got some local beef farmers. It's great. I have a couple more examples I'll show where beef can fit in. But I want to share just a few other ideas that can be kind of fun and easily customizable for these nice snacks, not just after school snacks, but kind of anytime snacks. Something that's pretty easy and generally a crowd favorite are to make energy bites. You can do this, usually they're no bake. There's sometimes like very little, production required. And you can swap in or out whatever works best for you and your food preferences or anything else that's going on. So oats are usually the base. Oats can generally be gluten-free if you need that. And then I like to mix in some ground flaxseed. You can put something sweet in there like chocolate chips or dried fruit. Peanut butter is usually the sort of like sticky base along with either honey or maple syrup or agave nectar. And then maybe some other kind of flavoring. I will also sometimes mix in protein powder just to make it a little bit higher protein still. So these are nice because you can just mix them together. You can also like pulse the oats a little bit in the food processor to get it a little less chunky. And then you just shape them up and let them firm up in the fridge. And then you can kind of put them in Ziplocs, like just, snack size Ziploc, 3 or 4, take them with you to school. They don't necessarily have to stay refrigerated. The fridge just helps to firm them up. So that's a really nice after school snack idea. Again, you can make a huge batch of them and keep them in the freezer or the fridge until you want them. But that's such a nice idea. Every time I bring these to the athletes at Lemoyne, they're gone like this, right? Especially the swim team. Man, they love them. The other thing that's nice to make yourself, I know you can get this already made, is trail mix. And this is another place where you can kind of customize it to be sweet or savory depending on what you like. So this was a trail mix that we just did with the women's lacrosse team at Lemoyne actually, and we had lots of options, but this was another one where we had someone on the team with a nut allergy, so we tried to make it not so like nut heavy like most trail mixes are. So instead, we still made it savory, but we used pretzel sticks, we used some beef jerky, small chunks, and then we had some other fun things. So we found like the baked green beans, we found pumpkin seeds, we had a separate option for nuts if people wanted that. And then we found these protein balls that were in the same section as the beef jerky. And then we had a couple of other little like sweet things for people that wanted it. But it was kind of just a nice reminder that trail mix doesn't always have to be so heavy on nuts to still be high in protein. And you can still have like some things to be sweet, but other things to be savory. So that's a good option too, is a nice snack that you can make in bulk and then just bring it with you as you need it. Okay, so getting a snack after school is key. Having that snack be a mix of carb and protein is really helpful. When it comes to getting ready for your actual workout or your game, 2 thoughts, right? One is around hydration, one is around quick fuel. So in terms of quick fuel, I would say the focus here is on some kind of carb that you know your body tolerates pretty well. This is not the time to be eating something that's super high in fiber because you want it to be quickly absorbed into your system. So there's lots of options. It could be something simple like a piece of fruit. The other thing that I would say is very popular at the college level, sort of rivals the Uncrustables, are those Go-Go Squeeze applesauces. Those are just a classic favorite, no matter how old you are. But even like a Nutri-Grain bar, I'm a big fan of these Honey Stinger products. So if you haven't tried Honey Stinger before, they make a waffle that was like their signature first product, but now they make these energy chews, and these are also very popular and pretty widely available. But really anything that is easy to eat, easy on your stomach, quick source of carbs, like even, traditional like fruit snacks are also kind of nice. So that's what you'd want to have as quick fuel before. How much before? It depends on the person. Some people can literally eat as they're running out onto the court or the field and have no issues. Other people need to give it like 20, 30 minutes before they're ready to work out after they eat something. So it just depends. But that is important to have before, especially if you know you're about to go into some real intense workout or something that lasts a long time. During a workout or a game, you don't necessarily need to eat something, but if you know you're prone to having those like low blood sugar moments, then it sometimes is helpful just to have another dose of something with quick sugar. And so any of those before options can also still work, but like fruit can also be a good option, especially for those of you that do have like workouts in the summer. Freezing grapes and then having those as a just nice, refreshing, quick source of sugar, a little hydration at the same time is nice. Freezing watermelon chunks can also be a good idea. There are tons of these like sports nutrition products out there. If you ever shop at Fleet Feet, you might see them on the wall, right? There's all these like gels and goos and things. Those are nice, they're convenient, but you don't have to use those. It's really just about whatever feels good for you and whatever's quick and available. You can even make your own energy gels and energy chews. Dates are a really good base. So you can even just eat dates or use dates as a base to make kind of your own version of these things. So then the hydration piece, you know, the goal beforehand is just to get something in. And generally, it depends obviously on your body size as far as how much you need, but keep in mind that when we take a sip of something, it's roughly 1 ounce, and so that can help you kind of keep track of like how many sips you're taking, and hopefully it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 8 to 24. Again, the timing beforehand is going to depend on you, but within the like hour leading up to your workout is when you should start hydrating. During the workout, the general rule of thumb for most people is 8 ounces every 15 minutes, and water is usually the best option, especially if you're not doing something too intense. But if you know you're like a real heavy salt sweater or just a heavy sweater in general, then you might want to have a sports drink during your workout. How do you know if you're a heavy salt sweater? Well, sometimes, maybe, when you're working out and you're sweating, you know, the sweat might like drip in your mouth and you taste it and it tastes salty. If it tastes really salty, that's a sign that you might have like more salt coming out when you're sweating than usual. The other way to tell is that when you finish working out, if you get that like really lovely crystal necklace on when the sweat dries, or it's on your shirt and it's like shining and there's crystals there, those are salt crystals. And so that's another reminder that you're a salty sweater. When I talk to teams about this, there's inevitably always one person on the team that everyone looks at as I describe that, and they're like, oh yeah, that's you. So if you know that about yourself, then you probably want to have a sports drink most of the time, not just water, to help replace the salt that you're sweating out. And this is one of those other messages that's different than what we might hear when we're just generally learning about nutrition, right? There's so much around like, oh, avoid salt, choose low sodium things. Well, yeah, for some people that's appropriate, but as an athlete, like you need salt. And there's now actually sports drink, like electrolyte drink mixes that have really high levels of sodium because we're recognizing that that's what some athletes need. So it's okay to have a sports drink with sodium. It's okay to have the like regular, not low sodium versions of foods, especially if it's right before or after you're going to work out. So lots of sport drinks out there, both pre-made, you know, pre-bottled drinks and then powders as well. It's really like personal preference. There are some slight differences between them, but for me, it's whatever's going to help you to drink more fluid, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to just make sure you're staying really hydrated. So there's not necessarily one clear winner there. It's just consistently drinking throughout the time you're exercising. I do want to just say a little bit about these lovely drinks that have become so popular. There's nothing magical about them, right? Like I just said, most of the sports drinks are all pretty similar. These are not any, you know, spectacular improvement to what's already on the market as far as sports drinks go. Most of these drinks that claim to, like Celsius says, is giving you essential energy, accelerating your metabolism, burning body fat, that's not exactly what the ingredients in that product are doing for you. Most of these drinks just have really high amounts of B vitamins, which are great, like love B vitamins. But has anyone ever heard of someone having a B vitamin deficiency? I haven't. Generally, no. I mean, we're all pretty okay on B vitamins. Some other vitamins, maybe not so much, but B vitamins we do a good job with. They're added to a lot of cereals, like we're good on B vitamins. So when you're drinking these things and you look on the label and it says it has like 1,000% of vitamin B12, that's not really benefiting you any differently than something that gives you like 50% of vitamin B12, because we get enough. We don't need extra. Does anyone know what happens to all that extra B vitamin? You know. Say it louder.
You pee it out.
You pee it out. You're absolutely right. That's what you're paying for. When you're buying this stuff with 1,000% of B vitamins for the day, you're just buying yourself some expensive pee. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. You don't need it. And the other thing that these often include is some source of caffeine, right? Whether it's like this fancy green tea, guarana extract. Caffeine is not a source of energy, right? Caffeine doesn't have calories, it's not a source of energy. It mentally picks you up and maybe makes you feel more alert, which might have its own benefits, but it's not giving you more energy and it's not magically burning your body fat. So again, be mindful of that, especially for any of you who feel like you have a sensitivity to caffeine. That may not be the best option for you. You don't need it, it's not hydrating you any differently. What you need in these drinks are the water, and a little bit of the sugar, and the electrolytes, which is sodium, chloride, maybe magnesium, maybe potassium. The other stuff, really just marketing. Okay, so then let's think about after a workout, and for I know a lot of you, this is like late afternoon, evening, so there's really two opportunities to sort of refuel afterwards and help with recovery. One is right away, and I think for a lot of us that's going to be a snack, kind of on the way home, maybe before you have dinner. And it could be, that you reverse this and have dinner and then a snack, but the point for each of these is that this is the time to really focus on having a good meal. So going back to that 80-20 rule, you want it to be the 80% of the time here. And this can be also not just a focus on carb, but bringing back in some good protein to help with recovery. So a couple of options, like right away, I would say if you're gonna still be at school when you're having this snack, it can be whatever you take with you, whether it's those energy balls or, a mix of like Fig Newtons with some nuts, or the beef jerky with some goldfish. I love all these drink options too. A lot of these are shelf stable. They don't have to be cold. I mean, they're probably better cold, but they don't have to be. So lots of good drink options that are a nice mix of carb and protein. But if you are able to do something at home, maybe making a fruit and yogurt parfait. I'm also a huge fan of smoothies. And this is generally my equation for a good recovery smoothie, is that you want to have some sort of liquid base, chocolate milk, orange juice, tart cherry juice is a great option, coconut water, whatever frozen fruit you like, and then some protein, peanut butter, Greek yogurt, protein powder, and then I always like to add in something extra. I sometimes will sneak in oats, ground flaxseed, chia seeds. My new favorite is frozen avocado, which is really nice to sneak in for those of us that have eaters that don't always eat a lot of healthy stuff. It's nice, especially if you want this to be pretty hearty, right? So finding ways to just pick whatever combination like your kids will enjoy or that you'll enjoy, because again, we want this to be consumed. We don't just want to make something fancy and then have nobody drink it. So that's a good option right afterwards as well. And then when you have that recovery meal, this is when you want it to be more balanced between the carb and the protein. So thinking back to that plate image, right, where you have the good mix and try to follow those My Plate guidelines. So just a couple of examples. And again, very mediocre food photography. So using the Instant Pot, you can do like a real quick kind of like homemade hamburger helper, right? So this was just like a beefy taco kind of recipe where we used elbow macaroni, cooked everything in the Instant Pot, right? You don't have to make a million different dirty dishes, and it's quick. It's really quick, easily customizable. My other favorite quick go-to is to get pre-made rotisserie chicken at the grocery store, and there are so many different meals you can make out of this, right? So this was men's basketball at Lemoyne. We did some chicken and rice bowls. The guys shopped for all these ingredients. They did a quick prep, which doesn't require a whole lot of prep here. And then it's just making an assembly line. And it's easy, but it's quick. And if you have a lot of different preferences in your family, you can accommodate them pretty easily with something like this. And I called it, it's just like Chipotle. It's a chicken and rice bowl that you might get at Chipotle, but it's easy to make on your own. But with rotisserie chicken, you can also easily make quick chicken tacos. You can get naan bread and make any kind of, chicken pizza on your naan bread. There's a lot you can do, which is easy and quick because it's already cooked. So it takes one huge time-saving step out of the way. And then my last example, again, thank you, New York Beef Council, is to do sheet pan quesadillas. And we did these also with men's basketball. We did beef quesadillas, but we also added in some beans to just jazz up the protein even more. But this is a nice way to sneak in veggies, right? When you have a quesadilla, you can mix stuff in, and generally it can go unnoticed. We did this on sheet pans so that we could make a bunch all at once. And that is nice if you have a large family to feed. It's easy. And these are the kind of things where, you know, sometimes there's meals where like the leftovers are almost better than the original version because like reheating it just makes it taste better. Like this is one of those recipes where it just gets better when you have it as a leftover. So that's a nice option for like a Sunday night or a Monday night because then you have leftovers for the rest of the week. So those are just some good meal options during the weeknight that hit that goal of the carb, the protein, and are really good as a recovery option after a workout. So that was the timing piece. 2 quick rules to go through, and then we'll stop and see what questions you have. So if you can't tell already, I'm very much a food first kind of person, right? I think we can easily get our needs met through food. Most of us don't need to rely on any special supplements, especially not greens, powders, right? We can just eat real food to get all those nutrients we need. But there are definitely times where it can be helpful to take a supplement. I think for the female athletes in the room, sometimes it's difficult to get our iron or our calcium needs met depending on your food preferences. And so sometimes that's important to take an iron or calcium supplement or just a multivitamin that has those things. We're learning more and more about the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids, and they're helpful in a lot of ways in the sports world. We're starting to see that they actually are really helpful in post-concussion recovery. But we're just not great fish eaters as a society, and so we don't always eat enough fish and fish oil to meet those omega-3 needs. So taking a supplement of that can be beneficial. It really just depends. And then I've talked a couple times about protein powder. I'm a fan of that, not necessarily as like a meal replacement, but just to use to up your protein. And so that can definitely be something that's beneficial. But with any of those supplements, it's really important to buy from reputable sources, and as much as you can to choose companies that do this independent third-party testing. So depending on the brand you're shopping for, I would look for one of these 2 symbols on there, and that's really important if you're using protein powder or creatine, that you want it to be third-party tested. And when we get into like the college levels, this becomes even more important because there are banned substances that they test for. But a lot of things you'll see now, even that you buy at Wegmans, have the third-party testing. Wegmans protein powder now does this, so that's important. You can go on the NSF website. They have an app actually where you can tell what products are third-party tested from their company. So that's something to keep in mind if you choose to use supplements. And then lastly, I've talked about hydration a bunch already, but just to kind of give you a quick overview, it's kind of the million-dollar question about how much to drink throughout the day, but a really good starting point and rule of thumb is to take your body weight in pounds and divide it in half, and that's how many ounces of fluid you should aim for as like a minimum baseline amount. And for athletes, we go up from there. But in reality, if you just try to actually measure what you're drinking and compare it to that baseline amount, most of us aren't even there yet. So we try to use that as the starting goal and then adjust upward if we can get there. So that's one thing that you may want to just check over the next couple of days is like, how much am I actually drinking? And water's great, but we've had some research recently to say, water is not the only thing that can hydrate us. So if you're drinking other stuff, that's okay too. Like I said before, as far as sports drinks go, I'm more concerned with what you're actually going to drink. What is it that you will consume pretty frequently throughout the day? Obviously, there are things that are not as great, like soda. And I say that partly because of the sugar, but also because the carbonation tends to fill us up. And with a lot of the athletes I talk to, they need to eat more. And so I don't want them to be full on something carbonated because it's going to prevent them from wanting to eat the real stuff that I want them to get out of their food. So yeah, carbonated drinks are great, but I don't want that to be preventing you from eating other things. So how can we tell if we're drinking enough? Who knew we were going to talk about pee so much tonight? Here's another chance to talk about pee, because checking the color of your urine is honestly the best in-the-moment way to assess if you're hydrated enough. It should be pale, yellow, somewhat clear, and if you're at that point, congratulations, you've drank enough, but you can't stop drinking. You've got to keep drinking that same amount, right? And if your pee is dark yellow, then you have not had enough to drink, or you've had too much Celsius and too many B vitamins, because that does color your urine. So this is another way to kind of assess, and maybe you try checking this over the next couple of days and see where you are, because this does give you that real in-the-moment assessment of like, have I had enough to drink yet? Probably not. Like, I think most of us walk around with sort of a baseline level of dehydration that we've just accepted. So for all of us, drinking more is generally going to be helpful. Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, I know I talked about a lot of things. I talked quickly from New Jersey. Apologize about that. But I would really encourage you to try and think of one or two things that we talked about that you might realize you need to work on, and then really make an effort to focus on those over the next couple of weeks, like I said, between now and Thanksgiving, right? And see how it goes. See if you're able to create a new habit that you can stick with once your winter sports start, or just stick with the rest of the school year, and then maybe add on another change or habit that you want to. And I'll put in just kind of a shameless plug as we finish here. You know, if this is something that you feel like, gosh, I have so many questions or so much other stuff I want to talk about, or if you have like a unique situation that you need help with, I do have a private practice where I meet with people individually to talk about sports nutrition, to talk about weight management, to talk about any other nutrition issue that's going on. And depending on health insurance, it is sometimes covered through health insurance. If not, and you pay out of pocket, then it's often reimbursable through like an HSA. So I do have business cards out there with the free samples as well if you are interested, or you can let me know. I've got my contact info here on the next slide. So I'm excited to have you all here, and I hope this was, useful, even if there was just like one or two nuggets that you took away with you. Thanks again to the Beef Council. If you didn't grab beef jerky on the way in, please make sure you grab some on the way out. And I'm going to also put out there some honey stinger samples. If you've never tried honey stinger before, their stuff's pretty good. But I'm happy to take some questions now if anybody has any. And be bold, don't be scared to ask questions. Yeah, go ahead.
What about like honey before, like running or during running or before a game?
Yeah, having honey beforehand. Yeah, I mean, that's a good option too, right? It's like a real direct source of sugar. To get into like the nitty gritty, so honey is kind of a mix of glucose and fructose, and glucose is really the carb that we prefer. We can still use fructose, we just have to like convert it to glucose. So there's like a slight difference compared to something that is just more pure glucose, like a piece of white bread. But yeah, it's not a bad thing. I mean, that's kind of the whole like basis for these honey stinger products, right? Is that they're kind of like sweetening things with honey. So yeah, it's totally a good option. And that's why I like using honey sometimes as the sweetener in those energy bites, because it also is a quick source of sugar. Yeah. Do you get like the honey sticks? Is that what you use?
Just straight on the bottom.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah, I saw another hand over here. Yeah.
In your opinion, if you're giving your kids some protein drinks, animal protein versus plant protein, does one get to you quicker?
Great question. Yeah, so the question was about animal protein versus plant protein. So historically, the research has always supported that whey protein, which comes from cows and from milk protein, is the one that's more like readily available in our body and is more similar to our own body protein and generally supports muscle synthesis a little bit better. But there's been new research that has shown, like, because now there's all these products and they have like all these different blends of the plant proteins, and so some of those have actually shown like pretty comparable results to the whey protein. What I will say though is that For the most part, the plant proteins, you have to have a higher amount. So what I normally see is like 20 or 25 grams of whey protein would be sufficient, but you need like 40 grams of the plant protein, which is okay. It's just a bigger dose, and some people don't want that. So yeah, I would say at this point, they're more accepted to have either. I still think that the whey protein is like a little bit more superior. And for those that have any issue like digesting milk, the whey protein generally is not a source of lactose. Like that's totally separate. So you can still use whey protein powder and it likely doesn't have any issues if you're lactose intolerant. But those Core Power Fairlife drinks that I showed, they also add the lactase enzyme. So if you are lactose intolerant, you likely can still drink those and it's fine. Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's a hot topic for sure. I saw another hand. All right, let's have it.
Is it good to have pre-workout before a game?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. So, pre-workouts, okay. You probably know what I'm going to say about this because it's similar to my stance on the Celsius drinks, but pre-workouts are going to have a lot of caffeine, right? A lot of caffeine. So it's not necessarily bad, it's just, it's going to pep you up because it makes you feel more alert, but it's not actually giving you energy. Some of the pre-workouts also have creatine. Creatine's not bad, but it depends on what your sport is as far as whether it's going to be helpful for you. Creatine helps with like short power bursts because it's helping you create energy in that first like 10 seconds of what you're doing. So if you're about to go run a cross-country race or play a soccer game, that the pre-workout's probably not as beneficial for you compared to if you're wrestling, to be quite honest, right? There's other stuff in pre-workouts too. Usually the other ingredients are there to like buffer acid as it builds up, which you do when you create energy really quickly. So again, same thing, like that's not beneficial for an endurance sport, but it might be beneficial for those shorter duration sports. But I'll be honest, the symbols I showed about the third-party testing, there's not that many pre-workouts that are third-party tested, and what that tells me is that they probably have a bunch of random stuff in there, and it may not actually be what's on the label. So you don't really know what you're taking, and you might be paying for just nothing, right? It might all be them selling you on the marketing, and I mean, there's no one like set number. When we talk about protein, it's usually relative to a person's body weight and body size. But what I will say is that it's generally high. Like, I think for the most part, what we've learned over the years is that the initial sort of like recommendation we give to just general people for protein is probably not high enough for just the general population. So then what we've been telling people who are athletic probably is not high enough for them either. So I usually recommend things in terms of like grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. I don't know if anyone's seen that SNL skit about George Washington and the metric versus like other units. If you haven't seen it with Nate Bargatze, it's really funny. Anyway, he talks about like, oh, they were going to use this system that no one else uses. So I use grams per kilogram, which I know means we have to convert from pounds to kilograms. But usually, depending on the sport, I would say that they might need upwards of like 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which is pretty high and is almost higher than what most recommendations are, but that's sort of what we're now learning. Just like we're learning about the protein digestion with the plant versus the whey protein, we're realizing we need more, especially for athletes. So depending on the sport, endurance athletes maybe not quite as high, but if you're in like a strength and power sport, if you're doing more strength training, then absolutely that is an appropriate amount, especially for someone who's growing. Yeah, and a male athlete in general. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I'd like to know what type of meat would be the best, like, giving protein.
Yeah, what type of meat? Honestly, lean meat, so chicken, lean beef, lean pork, fish, any of those. The protein amount doesn't really vary all that much, but getting the leaner cuts is helpful because then you're getting more protein and less fat in that serving. Good question. And then as far as like non-meat sources go, same as before, right? Like you can definitely still get protein from beans and from some of these non-meat sources, but generally like the equivalent is you have to have a higher portion size to get the same amount of protein. So for some people, it's like the volume of food becomes a lot to try to meet your protein goals with non-meat sources of protein, which is doable. It's just like you have to make sure that that feels okay to eat that much. Yeah. Because like I said, my recommendation is almost always eat more for most people that I talk to. Even if they're trying to lose weight, sometimes you still have to eat more. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I'm really glad that you all had this interest. I'm happy to stick around if you have more questions. Like I said, there's samples to grab on the way out. My cards are also out there if you want to grab my contact info. But I'm happy to hang around for a little bit if you have other questions. So thank you all so much. And yeah, I'm glad you all came out.